Dave Pryor. Welcome to Drunken PM Radio. I have 3 guests today, and we're plagued by Friday afternoon incidents, but hopefully this one's going to go through okay. We're going to be talking about Endava, Dava.X.AI, and Miro, and how these things work together. And before we do all that, I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves. So Matt Cloke is the CTO of Endava. Matt, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background and what the company does?
Sure. So my name's Matt Cloke. I consider myself an inveterate geek. So fundamentally, I've been messing around with computers since a young age, since about 8 years old. And if I wasn't being a CTO by day, I'd still very much like to sit in the corner and carry on writing code, but don't really get the opportunity to do that anymore. Endava is a great IT services company that no one has ever heard of at all. So we've actually been around since the turn of the century. So we've been doing this for about 26 years. We have become known in the industry as being very good at being able to do distributed agile delivery for our clients and help solve their problems by writing great solutions. And we started off in the early days by using what we would call a nearshore delivery model. So using teams in Central and Eastern Europe, delivering to clients in Western Europe. And then we've slowly expanded around the globe. So today we're a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. We've got about 12,000 people around the company, around the world, in offices as far away as Sydney in Australia, all the way through to Rosario in Argentina and everywhere in between.
Wow.
So that's a little bit about Endava and a little bit about me.
Cool. Thank you. And Joe is going to introduce himself now. So Joe Dunleavy is the global head of Dava.X.AI group at Endava. That's
Thanks
a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, Dave. I have a huge ego, so it's really important that that's in there. I am kidding. Lovely to be part of this, and thanks very much for the opportunity. The Dava.X group on AI is what we internally refer to as AI Pod. We started this group about 3 or so years ago. We've always been involved in AI for the last 10 or more years with clients. The difference with the pod was we kind of put more of a focus around it, particularly with the explosion of all things generative AI. It meant that we obviously saw the potential of where that was going. So I oversee that group. It's a globally distributed group, and I'm part of Matt's organization. We originally started off as very client focused and where AI was going and that whole direction. And then I suppose with the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT, very much then started thinking about if it could create if it could create text, then how long would it be before it starts to create code? So we've been on that journey, and we'll get into the detail on us becoming more AI native and where kind of Flow organically came out of that. But if it's AI client focused or what we've been driving inside of the org, myself and the team get involved in it. And I'm based out of Ireland, and I'm software engineer at the start of my career with Microsoft 20 or more years ago. And lovely to be here.
All right, cool. Thanks, Joe. And Dave Ross.
You're Irish. You're Irish. Is that what the accent was, Joe?
Yes, I am okay. Irish. You're British, I assume?
I am British, yes.
Excellent. Lovely to see you again after 5 years. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, my gosh. Well, so I have a Canadian/Texas accent, so that just adds to the mix. But lovely to be here, Dave. And of course, I'm Dave Ross. I'm one of the evangelists at Miro. Miro, many people still think of us as a whiteboard, a digital whiteboard. We've been around for about 13, 14 years now. But Miro has also been on a journey to develop more AI capabilities. And so we really don't even consider ourselves much of a whiteboard anymore. We're more of an AI powered innovation workspace. And that's where people can come together for, during all phases of the PDLC, the product development lifecycle. And they can ideate, they can generate insights from data, they can create prototypes, they can create requirements, and then be able to pass that kind of information over to AI coding tools. So that's the journey that we've been on for a while. for me, my background, I am completely non-technical. I've probably written maybe 5 lines of code in my entire life. So don't judge me too harshly, but I have worked in the agile space, and that's really the kind of my background. I started off as a humble Scrum Master many, many years ago, worked through many different sort of software startups here locally in Austin, and then have worked at other larger enterprises. Before I joined Miro, I was at GitHub, for example, and before that, I was at Expedia Group. So I've kind of seen it from the small scale to the big scale, and everywhere in between in terms of software development.
Cool. Thank you. And I just to give a plug for Miro, if you're only looking at it as a visualization tool and not digging into the AI stuff, you are missing out on a lot because there's some really amazing stuff that it does. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I'm wondering, Matt and Joe, if you can kind of frame the problem that you guys face when you decided to go after AI, because you're not just looking at a bunch of developers like setting up their own ChatGPT accounts and starting to figure out how to write code. You're talking about it at scale across the organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to kick us off, Matt?
Yeah. So when I get asked about this, I think it's really important that people kind of understand the journey that IT services company and Endava in particular have been on, which is if you wind the clock back around 2+ years, we had our ChatGPT moment. And what I mean by that is we went from quite happily being a team that used distributed agile and were delivering great solutions for our clients to people going, well, we don't need you anymore. We had a real existential moment where pretty much every analyst, shareholder, client all said exactly the same thing, which is, well, why would I be using you if I can use all of the tools and use AI to be able to go and write my code for you? So we've really been on that journey for the last couple of years. And I think one of the most important things we did right at the very beginning of that journey was to look at it through the lens of saying, rather than how can I use AI to take an existing process and make it maybe 10% or 15% better, how can we reimagine what we're doing so we think about AI first? And internally, and quoting someone from the Stanford D School, a guy by the name of Jeremy Utley, we said, it's not about value capture. It's not about that 10 to 15% incremental improvement. It's about value creation. How can I imagine something completely new and a new way of working by going down that route? Now, what's interesting, many, many months, years, late nights, and arguments later, is when we go and talk to clients now, what we're talking about in terms of using AI technology is more of a method than it is about a particular tool, or it's more about a way in which people can come together to use that particular tooling. And that resonates massively because you're not talking about, oh, this platform or that tool. It's kind of like, oh, you're turning up and in the same way that Agile said, here's a good way of organizing humans to do work, you're coming up and you're going, here's a great way to organize agents to go and do work. So it's been a huge journey, but also hugely existential. If we don't do it, what happens to a company like ours?
So I want to ask about one thing here, because you did mention something. I don't know if everybody caught it, but it is not just you facing the existential crisis of, oh my gosh, what do we do now? But actually learning from the agile transformations. Everything changes. Nobody wants you. And instead of just pushing harder on it, you went to design thinking to reimagine how to do this stuff, which is, I mean, I would think if I had a bunch of software development engineers, that would be like the last thing they would do. Be like, let's just sit in the problem space and not solve anything for a while. So and that must have created a lot of change in the culture and how you think about what you do, right?
Yeah. I mean, Joe, you've been up close to the coalface.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a massive journey, and we're still on that journey. I was actually at an event last night with OpenAI, and we were speaking about this whole. I think a period of time, it was like the technology was the question. How good would the technology become? Everyone used, I mentioned OpenAI, but loads of the different LLMs out there. But everyone could see hallucinations were a challenge. People were questioning the quality. Would it get there? with what we all thought maybe would take a bunch of years started end up being 6 weeks and 6 month windows. And now I think the penny has kind of dropped. It's no longer the technology readiness question. Yes, agents and orchestration and scaling there's still more work to do there for sure. But the general consensus of will it hit the quality marks to be very usable? I think we've kind of hit that inflection point. And now, as much as anything, it is the change management and the human side of how ready are people to change from the ways they've worked for forever, using agile and using an approach that they were comfortable in using. So we do have inside the organization, some people are jumping on this journey and what we're doing with Davaflow, which we'll talk about later. Some are on the fence about it, and some were skeptics. And just being honest, I mean, a company of our scale, you see the skepticism within it. I mean, at the end of the day, we all are human. It's hard when you go through a change like this. We're still on that journey, but it's very much, and we talked about it at this event last night. It's as much the change management people side of the coin now that we are going through. And I think it's a bit like the days I remember when waterfall and agile. It reminds me a lot of when people were like, I know waterfall, I trust it. Waterfall had its challenges as well documented, but that transition to agile wasn't easy for people to make either. And I think we're seeing it again here with this AI version of work. And it's just generally broadly the ways of working that we're seeing it across such a broad spectrum.
Yeah, I want to stay with that and kind of switch over to Miro for a second at the same time. So my knowledge of Miro came about at the beginning of the pandemic because all of a sudden I had to teach my classes online, and there's only a couple ways to do that, a couple different tools, and I ended up using Miro. But that is a tool that most people found during a time of very tumultuous change. And I'll say something if you can comment on it. To me, it was like the companion that maybe I didn't want, but now I'm accustomed to, and I feel good about interacting with. And if I have to walk into this new thing that Joe's going to like push onto my plate, I'd like to have something there that I at least is familiar to me.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you. I feel very, humbled and flattered with that sort of statement. But yeah, that's when lots of people discovered Miro for the first time was during the pandemic. And it was very much thrust upon them. And we helped a lot of companies, a lot of teams, a lot of people get through a very difficult period of time where, we were no longer able to be in the same room together, no longer physically located. And so, yes, that was kind of our humble origin story. But we've been able to kind of capitalize more and more on that familiarity that people have. Like I'll say it. I go to conferences sometimes, particularly agile conferences, and it's the closest I'll ever get to being a rock star because people come up to me and say,
people like me last week, how do I do this? Why can't I do this?
Exactly. I love Miro. I planned my wedding on Miro. Miro saved my life during, COVID. Thank you.
And you're like, Joe's done 2 degrees using Miro. So he's a big Miro guy.
Yeah. He's not
exactly. Exactly. So anyway, it's very gratifying to hear what you've said, Dave, and we certainly appreciate it. But yeah, and we're evolving along with everybody else in this AI journey. So can't wait to talk a little bit more about that as we get further into the Endava story.
Yeah, we're working towards it. So I have one more question before we get into Dava.X.AI. So you guys had already, Matt, maybe you can comment on this one. You guys had already kind of grown up distributed, whereas like all the agencies I were at, we were like, but that's what you guys were built to do. So I would imagine that transition during the pandemic was, not that it wasn't painful, but you had things in place.
Yeah.
Probably better formed than other folks did, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were Miro customers prior to the pandemic. And where we had kind of found the sweet spot was, ultimately, IT services is a people-based business, and you create the best relationships when you're in the same room as someone, and people think about how can we collaborate and everything else. But when you're operating with a model like a nearshore model, you want your teams to have as much information as the people who are able to sit in the offices and speak to the clients directly. So Miro was always at that kind of intersection point of allowing distributed teams to work with people inside of the room. And when the pandemic happened, I think the big change was probably not an us change; it was more of a client change, because there was no other option. There was no other way to collaborate. So actually, again, being us, being Endava, being able to turn up and go, don't worry, we can all still work. We can all still have that meeting, and that collaboration and that planning session can happen because we're using a tool from Miro, and that is entirely the way it works. I mean, there was something that you mentioned in the intro, which I think is really important, is, if I compare the Miro of 2018, 2019, whenever it was, to the Miro of today, the way in which the team have looked at that journey of building an AI workspace, somewhere where it is you go to do work, as opposed to simply the sticky company. I mean, I can't emphasize that, how much that has transformed for us, but equally seeing the great work that the Miro team have done.
Great.
So I'd like to talk about Dava.X.AI and how that ties in with Miro, but kind of pivoting off that too, I want to check in with you both, or all three of you, on something. I know a little bit about the way you're working together, and just to kind of tease it before we get to it, to me, it almost seems like historical Obeya. Like it's everything you would need for all the teams all in one place, but the history of it as well. Is that a fair way to encapsulate it?
I would think, I mean, organically, I think the use of the tool and the relationship has kind of grown. Matt mentioned it already. We were Miro customers prior to the pandemic. We clearly ramped up more users during the pandemic. It originally started off within our product strategy group, and a lot of the design thinkers of this world, people that are interfacing, doing creative things with clients, workshops, and the like. And then I suppose as we've been on this journey of becoming more of an AI native company ourselves, and what that meant for us was just, how does everybody at the company become more productive using AI? So AI alongside the person. And quite honestly, and Matt kind of covered it as well, big shout outs to Miro. Like very few companies adopted and incorporated AI into their platform as quickly as what Miro were doing. And part of it was, while we were reimagining the future for us and the Davaflow methodology, which we can talk about, it was also at the same time as Dave and the guys at Miro were embedding AI into their solution, that meant that there was a bit of a moment whereby it's almost like the two paths that we've always been had a strong relationship, but I think it's almost like the two paths kind of almost became the one journey. And that's really been, it's been great to see. And then the partnership have been able to feed what we kind of needed from a roadmap perspective, and then the ability for Miro to turn and pivot it. But like the early days of Flow, when Flow was an idea, a concept of an idea, we actually went to Miro's offices and worked alongside them to actually kind of put meat on the bones of it. So I'm a big fan of, like, people talk about partnerships and various different things. Like, a real partnership is when things like that happen. It's not like, it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like we need to get together. It was something that was very organic.
Just clicks.
And I think the cultures on both companies gel very, very well. And I don't know, Matt or Dave, if you want to add to that.
No, I mean, and I'm in complete agreement. I think the ability for the team to kind of like listen to us, and to, as we expressed a vision, to see people across the table from you going, yeah, we were thinking exactly the same thing, and how can we make this happen, has been useful. I think one of the biggest things as well is there must be a temptation. I mean, we're IT services. We service the needs for our clients. Many of the systems that we build never get seen by people. So, a RESTful API inside of a bank is not going to be seen by people. Yet Miro is a very public, everybody gets to see it. It can't hide as a product company. And yet they didn't rush to just implement what I would call meaningless AI. So it wasn't like, oh, look, you got a chatbot on the front of Miro and now, we'll walk away. It was actually thinking about it from a deep integration perspective, workflows, sidekicks, all of those things. But, it could have gone in a completely different direction.
Okay. So I want to stick with kind of go into that, but before we do that, what is Davaflow for people that aren't familiar with it?
Matt, do you want to kick us off there on that particular
Okay.
one? Since we call Matt the father of Davaflow, he doesn't like that, so it's only right and proper here that the father of Davaflow tells the origin story.
Yeah. So the origin story behind Davaflow, and at a headline, the way that we talk about it is as an AI engagement lifecycle. So not just as a software delivery lifecycle, but actually what is a way of thinking about and using AI to deliver better solutions for our clients. So where did it start? Well, like everyone else, we experimented with tools as we were building code and we were learning lessons. And then we switched over to the point where we started to use agents to build our code. And then we started working out that our backlogs couldn't be built quick enough or with enough quality to feed the agents quickly enough to do the work that they were doing. So we had to go and figure out how to come up with better ways of doing the exploration space and building backlogs. And then from that space, we were like, well, how do we even make sure that we're solving the right problems for our clients at a high level business side of things? So all of that was fundamentally encaptured into a 4-phase method or approach. The first one is called Signal. So how can we help our clients identify the right business problems to solve? And how can we do that in a proactive way as an IT services company? But equally, it could be that our clients go and do it within their space. And then once you've identified what are the business problems that need solving or features that need to be provided, how can you rapidly explore the solution space to be able to kind of make sure that you're heading in the right direction? So, can you create virtual personas and run virtual workshops? Hint, yes, you can. Miro is an integral part of that. But equally, can I produce clickable prototypes? Can I produce architectures which will then feed down into the process? And then when you actually want to go ahead and build something, we take it into what we call the govern phase. Now, the important thing here is we're producing code, but we don't call it build or coding, because what it is it's about human beings governing the output of agents and keeping them and defining the guardrails and defining the architectures and having a human in the loop as you go through the process of producing output. And then ultimately the thing that you produce goes into a production environment, which we refer to as the evolve phase, where you then generate new signals to restart the life cycle, or equally for it to start thinking about self-healing code or informing new tasks which have to be taken into a backlog of work. So the headline is Davaflow is an AI engagement lifecycle that goes from signal, explore, through govern into an evolve phase.
And just for if people aren't familiar with it, one of the things about this that's different than the old way of building software is you don't like deploy it and you're done with it. When you're using AI, you've constantly got to be retraining, resetting, making sure that it hasn't drifted too much, and keeping it pointing in the right direction, like a sailboat, keeping it pointing in the right direction.
Correct. And one of the most important learnings for us as we went through this is, and again, it's something I said at the top of this, which was anyone can go and buy the tools. Yeah. So, Cognition, Cursor, others, they'll all quite happily take your money and sell you a Windsurf or a Cursor IDE. But the important thing that we've discovered and what's embedded within this method are, well, what are the guardrails you have to capture? What's the policy as code that you've got to have? What are the skills that you need to be able to define to be able to consistently and repeatedly produce the right outcome, validate it and move it on to the next stage? That is what makes the biggest difference between something that works in an enterprise and something that is just, frankly, just messing around on the side. And trust me, there's a lot of that going on in our industry at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and if you're doing it at the enterprise level, like if you go into an organization where everybody's just been doing their own installation and doing whatever, I mean, that's a lot that you have to clean up and sort out.
Yeah, shadow IT, vibe coding, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the irony for me is the fact that we've now arrived at a point when we use the Davaflow method and the techniques and the various tools like Miro and others, that we can provide greater levels of traceability and accountability for what code was written where and for what purpose than I've ever seen produced by human beings. So we're actually at the other side of it now, where you're kind of like, if the auditor turns up and says, well, why did that piece of code go in there? You can go all the way back up through the chain of thought. You can go all the way back up into the kind of explore phase and look at the board and the ideas and everything else. And you're constantly building and maintaining a context which always will drive agents in the right direction.
Yeah, it's traceability on steroids. It's proper traceability.
So I want to test an assumption here. I know that I could go into any one of the LLMs and, give it a couple features like barely described and have it spit out a bunch of user stories and then create a text-based persona. But for me, having done that in Miro by dragging some stickies into the tool and having it show me, here's the backlog, here's your personas, here's the journey map, like all that. The visualization of that is really important. And I'm thinking about when I have to remember things, if I can like see it on a page or see it on the wall and remember how faded like the whiteboard marker was, like that is like a stamp of time in my head, almost like the same thing that music does for my brain. You're talking about a historical auditable record that's visualized.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
how does that affect people when they're connecting to the work?
Well, I think this is the let's call it the false premise of AI, and probably the bit that the industry has been fighting against for the last 2 years because ChatGPT was so successful, is everybody thinks in the context of everything as a chat-based interface and everything is typing and everything is there. We're human beings. Our background is chasing animals around on planes and throwing spears at them. And therefore, the visual representation, the visual context that is applicable in tools like Miro and elsewhere is precisely, as you say, the thing that people remember. They remember the end of the workshop where someone has scribbled on the whiteboard and everyone's like, yeah, that's the thing. Let's go and build that thing over there. And therefore, again, the power of what we've been able to do is, okay, guess what? That's context that can then be taken into an LLM. That's context that can then help generate a test case. That's context that will allow us to define an architecture and how you might deploy into a hyperscaler. And that was the aha moment when you could switch from text to images to workflows and all of the things in between.
But it's also the value and the scale of the context. Because as we all know, we all have a certain amount of capacity. You're in a workshop, somebody might have an absolutely incredible thing. If you didn't write it down or capture it in Miro on a post-it note or whatever, but it was discussed. The dynamic of what we use here is we actually record often the transcript, even the conversation, and then have even AI help us in kind of crafting and finding those things. It's that for me, the context is getting bigger. So, the ability to deliver something really different is stronger now, because this is the AI alongside the people. And I think this is the strong message that we talk about inside Endava. This is it's like a superpower when you layer in the AI.
I think if you've got a good tool that can summarize what happens in a meeting, I use Applaud, which is the templates for that are amazing. But I had not thought before about that side of it. And I would imagine also the audio aspect can be as powerful as the visual.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dave, how intentional is that? I mean, I know like the tool is offering a lot of capabilities, but is there time that's spent sitting around thinking like, how are we going to use this as a historical record?
A lot of time.
Okay.
A lot of time. We have a very, very talented engineering and product group at Miro. And that's really where they spend the bulk of their time sort of conceptualizing and thinking about, how can we maintain information in an unstructured and then maybe later in a structured way that can then be used as context within our AI tools, but then also external AI coding tools as well. And how can we make sure that, humans and agents can play together nicely in that same space, and sort of maintain that historical record. So, it's part and parcel of that AI journey that we've been on.
So you'd be able to see with whatever you're working on, why decisions were made, how they were reached, why we chose this over that. And I guess maybe what I said about it being like an obey was wrong, because this is like an obey with time as well. It's not just what's happening now, but it's what's happened in the past. How do we get here?
Over a time scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is an incredible assist for anybody working on the project.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things on that temporal dimension. One is the fact that you're completely correct. You can see the decision making and how it builds over time.
Yeah.
You know, was that an audio conversation between two people that's been captured as a transcription? Is it a visual record that's inside of Miro? But then if you overlay on top of that, also the cycle time is hugely reduced. So, you know, all of the time is being compressed, but you also have the record of why you made those particular decisions. So those are the rocks that humans hold on to as they go through the process and stop being overwhelmed. It is that nature of, well, okay, I remember that Dave made that decision last Tuesday in that stand-up meeting or in that kind of workshop, and I've got the record. It's in there. And, you know, I use AI every single day, and increasingly I'm using it to help me document decisions, where things were done, generate the next set of tasks that I need to work on. And that's just me as a manager inside of an organization. That's not me as a software engineer or anything else. I'm literally finding it hard to do my job unless I've got AI to assist me.
Wow. So when you're going into, this is for all three of you, an organization to try to get them to adopt not just, you know, like AI plus all this stuff together, there's this part of my brain that thinks like you've just walked up to somebody with one of those old disposable cameras that have the flash bulb built into it. And you're like, here's Minority Report. You can just do stuff in the air now and move time around. I mean, how do you even have that conversation with them? Because it must seem like science fiction when you're trying to get people to completely change what they're doing. Like, don't take my Gantt chart away. And you're like, no, man, it's time now. Like, how does that work?
Joe, you can kick it off.
I mean, it's hard, Dave, is probably it's a lot for people to take on. It really is. For our own people using this approach and then using this approach with clients. So I part of it is we are, you know, we're relearning in some cases, right? I mean, Matt covered the signal phase, and at the core of it, the signal phase is actually the perfect place to start, because it is, are we validating the right problem, and do we know why we're even solving that problem in the first instance? So it's a little bit like a layer cake. You kind of start there, get their comfort with it, get the understanding, show how the tool brings the value to bear. Matt covered it already in a very compressed timeline. This isn't a speed play. It's speed with the quality and all of the metrics and supports you'd need to be done at an enterprise scale. But quite honestly, if you went to the end of the journey or showed them all of it, I think it's very overwhelming. So it is a little bit like you build the story with them. Exactly. Because same way as people generally like to, you know, start with a single step and kind of go on that journey. So we take a similar approach. Well, I think what's interesting as a, you know, traditionally technology services company, a lot of our salespeople and our growth organization would think about that's for the coders and those guys over there. We sell the thing and then you guys deliver it. What's interesting about something like Flow is that they're actually involved in the methodology, in the process. So the signal phase is as much for them and how they engage with clients. So it's no longer this, you know, Agile was something that really the growth org weren't that involved in. It was how the teams delivered. So it is. I know this, I don't really like the term shift left because it's kind of overused a lot, but I do genuinely think, but it starts with a single step is probably the best way to put it, with engaging the client. But you don't go to the end of that story too quickly, because there's a lot to take on here. There's a lot.
And basically everybody's a coder now because they can just go vibe code whatever they want.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Dave, you go next, and then I'll finish.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Miro's been on this exact same journey internally as well, right? And because we use Miro to build Miro and improve Miro along the way. And so, you know, just to, I guess, pile on what Joe said, it's very much, baby steps at the beginning, and you learn a little bit and you get comfortable with a certain, you know, level of the process, and then you take it a step or two further, and then another step or two further, and another step or two further. If, you know, I've been at Miro for 3 years, and I feel like I've over the course of those 3 years, worked for 3 different companies because we have iterated on our internal
wow.
ways of working to such an extent that the internal workings of the company are radically different from where we were even just a year ago. So everybody is, I feel like, going through the same journey, and it just seems to be a little bit different for us because the tool that we're telling our customers to use is the tool that we use ourselves to build the tool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's hard for clients too, right? I mean, our clients are faced with the same thing. We've ultimately kind of become, we did this to ourselves to then know how to actually help customers go on that journey.
Yeah.
We're just a couple of steps kind of ahead of them. But it's almost like eating your own dog food, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to sound like a newspaper headline now. It's like beware the jaw drop. So one of the things for me is that there's kind of like this acceptance cycle, and I'm very lucky that I get to talk to the C-suite of many of our clients or be involved in those initial conversations. And we've gone in and demonstrated the art of the possible to the C-suite. So predominantly in that kind of signal and explore space. And there was one particular team where we went into the session having done a small amount of prep work, not a huge amount, where we'd said, right, we heard you talk about these 4 or 5 problems before we even came into the room with you. We've taken it through the signal and explore phase. Here are clickable prototypes. Here's our working out in terms of the virtual personas and the virtual workshops we ran that produce those prototypes. And there's a certain amount of skepticism. It's like, yeah, I've had people turning up doing this for years. I know that there was a team of 20 working on this last night until 2:00 in the morning. And then we're like, so what's your feedback on these ideas? And it's kind of right there, well, it wouldn't be that, or that's not important, et cetera, et cetera. And we're live transcripting the meeting where we asked that right at the very beginning. And so we took their feedback and we proceeded to do the rest of the meeting. And then 10 minutes later, we returned back and we showed how the feedback that they had been given was able to go all the way through the process to amend the personas, to amend the virtual workshops, to amend the clickable prototypes with a wall clock across the top, and then produce a report to say this is the difference between what you saw then and what you saw now. And it was a literal jaw drop in that room as the CEO literally turned around to his product team and said, I've been asking you for months to be able to show me that these are things that you can happen. So guess what? We've got a really, really positive C-suite individual, a CEO. Now we have a product team that really, really don't like us because
product teams run away from Matt now because he's popular with the product community.
So this brings up something I want to ask about, maybe more of a social thing. And I told Dave this story the other day that I had a client and a student in class, and I showed them how what we had just spent like 6 hours doing, you could do in Miro in a matter of 10 minutes. Yeah. And the person started to cry. And I'm like, she had to turn off her camera, like, what's wrong? She's like, that's everything that I love in my job. You just did in 5 minutes. And from an adoption standpoint, I mean, I think that is like one part of the story because it doesn't focus on the fact that what's opened up to her now is all this other creative stuff that she has the ability to do that she couldn't do before. Yeah. But how do you get people to see the future and not feel like, no, I want the old way?
That is the number one question that I think doesn't just face our industry, it's going to face our society as we move forward, which is, people use paradox shifts, paradigms, crossing the Rubicon, whatever language people want to use. Yeah. But what you just described is perfectly correct. For those of us who are enthusiastic about the technology, but look at all of the wonderful things you can now do. Yeah. And yet for a large amount of people, they like doing the job that they were doing. And I always use the analogy of like the lift operator in a New York skyscraper, which was like every single high rise used to have at least one operator to press the button and to take you up and down. And they probably quite liked their job. They would talk to Bob as Bob went to accounts in the morning. And they spoke to Jill as she left in the evening to go home and see her kids. And then someone turned up one day and said, you see this little box? That's going to replace you. Boom, there you've gone.
And now even that box has been replaced. You just swipe your key and it just only sends you to one floor.
And exactly. So that is the biggest challenge. I mean, look, we've got 8,500, 10,000 engineers, however many it is. Many of them enjoy the art and act of writing code. And now we're saying, well, actually, a large language model can write code better than you. In fact, it can write better code than 99.98% of every human being that's ever existed in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, your job's different, but look at all the exciting stuff you can do over here on the side.
It's like you walk up to Keith Moon and hand him a drum machine. Like,
it's a huge.
They'll always.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, look, there's always going to be an opportunity for people to do the things that they enjoy. Because, like, if you take the lift operator analogy, in the highest of high-end buildings, you have concierge services. You have someone who's at the front desk who will still take you and press the button and take you up and down. And, you know, yes, Keith Moon and the drummers, well, there are lots of people now who have returned to the more analog feel of, well, I'm going to play a musical instrument or I'm going to play the drums. So there will be opportunities for people to do the things that they enjoy doing, but it's the liberation of the other things which I think people have kind of got to open their mind to.
And there will be a whole new field of companies that their only job is to clean up all the sloppy vibe coding, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And fix the security holes. Okay.
Yep.
So what about, Dave, do you have any comment on that from the Miro side? Like, how do you guys have put all this incredible capability into the tool, and it frees them up to do a lot of other things, but how do you guys get them over that sense of like, but that's mine?
Yeah. You have to highlight exactly what sort of Matt and Joe have been talking about, which is like the opportunity for all of the other, LLMs don't have taste. They don't have discernment, right? They don't have, things that human beings innately have. And so if you spent your time as a designer, perhaps, or as a product person building a very carefully crafted, prototype that took, weeks to build, well, now you can build 5 to 6 to 10 to 8 different versions of that, and be able to, put that in front of users and say, well, let's talk about all of these different, options that we have. What do you think works best for you? Interact with it, use it, tell me what you think. And then you can take all of that great feedback, and then feed that back into the, into the model. So being able to be, to always be kind of in that learning and feedback loop, always being able to apply, I think that this format or this UI UX is the way that we need to go. Being able to make those choices and then get the prototype to be built for you is the real win. So that's really what you have to talk to people about. It's like, yes, you were a master of your craft, but now you can amplify your craft and apply even greater judgment and greater taste and greater discernment to what you are building. And that's the real win for you.
That I had not thought about that. Like, I remember back in the beginning of the internet, having designers sit down with my clients, and like 3 days or 4 days later, we'd have like a prototype and the client would hate it, and we'd wait 3 or 4 more days. But now they can do it in the room in real time. And they're not spending 4 days like imagining it all themselves, but they're getting enough information to get to the final product faster.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
I'm going to have to jump, I'm afraid. Because I do have a hard stop. I would normally bounce it, but it's a client conversation I have to have.
Totally understand. Any final words?
Yeah.
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. The only thing I would say that I think is really important, you're leaning towards it, is this is a mindset shift more than anything else. The era of the growth mindset and everything that we've talked about for a long time. I think this is the tipping point for this is not the era of having a fixed mindset around some of the stuff. The growth mindset is really, I do think, what will transform and differentiate companies and people in terms of how they move forward using this technology.
Right.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you very much.
No problem. Talk to you soon,
Exactly.
guys.
All right.
Thanks,
Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
I know there's the event coming up. Do you want to promote that, Dave? Do you want to talk about?
If you want to hear a little bit more about the Endava story and how Miro is playing a part of their reinvention of their engagement model, then on May 19th, we are having what's called Canvas 2026. It's in San Francisco. That's the in-person event, but there is also a streaming version. So if you want to go see Joe talk about what we've discussed here in a little bit more detail, just search for Miro Canvas 2026. You can sign up for the streaming event, and of course, if you're local to San Francisco, you're very welcome to register and join us as well. They can give you a little bit more information on the Davaflow process and how it all fits together.
Cool. And I'll have links to all that in the show notes. And if you haven't attended one of these virtually, my jaw dropped a bunch of times last year. I think you guys were in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I was watching. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes. What if they want to get, Matt, if they want to get in touch with you or Joe, what's the best way to do that?
So LinkedIn is a good place to start. If you either go via the Endava pages or both of us have got fairly unique names which allow us to be found on LinkedIn, as opposed to all of the people who are called John Smith who suffer greatly on LinkedIn, I'm sure. To emphasize what Dave said, I'll be speaking at Canvas 26 in London, which I believe, if I check my calendar, is happening on June the 2nd, which is correct. And then for the Canvas event in Sydney, the date of which I cannot remember, another colleague of ours called Wes Fagan will be talking about the use of Miro. As Dave said, it will be a deeper dive into the kind of journey that we've been on and where we've been. And if anyone is at those events, more than happy to talk to them about the journey that we've been on and connect with people.
Cool. All right. Thank you. And Dave, what if they want to get in touch with you?
Same place. Find me on LinkedIn. I have an extremely common name, but you can find me if you type in Dave Ross at Miro. Always love to connect there. So that's the best place to find me.
And I'll have links to all of this in the show notes as well. Yeah. Well, cool, guys. Thank you very much for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
It's been great, Dave.
Yeah. Great to be here.